The quiet signal doctors still miss. It does not show up on scans. It rarely triggers alarms. And by the time it becomes obvious, years have already slipped away. This signal is subtle, persistent, and deeply misunderstood. Modern medicine excels at detecting failure, tumors, blockages, deficiencies, but longevity is often shaped long before failure appears. To understand why this signal matters, we need to look at what the body communicates before disease ever forms. Because aging does not begin with collapse. It begins with drift. That drift is easy to overlook precisely because nothing seems wrong. Numbers fall within acceptable ranges. Symptoms are vague. There is no single event to point to. The body continues functioning, but something fundamental has changed beneath the surface. The system no longer resolves stress the way it once did. Researchers noticed it in patients who looked healthy. Normal blood work, acceptable fitness, no diagnosis that explained their fatigue or slow recovery. Yet something was clearly off. Healing took longer. Stress lingered. Resilience felt thinner than it should. These individuals were not failing, but they were no longer finishing biological processes completely. The signal was not pain. It was delay. Delayed recovery after stress. Delayed return to baseline after illness. Delayed repair following effort. The body was still functioning, but it was no longer finishing. Cycles that once closed cleanly now stretched forward unresolved. This delay matters because biology depends on completion. Stress responses are meant to rise and fall. Inflammation is meant to activate and then clear. Energy is meant to be spent and then restored. When those cycles stall, the body adapts by conserving. Aging accelerates not through damage, but through unfinished business. This pattern appeared years before chronic disease. Long before intervention seemed necessary. It was easy to dismiss. Aging, after all, is expected, but the timing was wrong. These changes were appearing too early, too quietly, and too consistently across different systems to be ignored. What doctors often miss was not a marker, but a process, the loss of resolution, the body's growing inability to fully close biological loops. Medicine is trained to detect breakdown, not delay. It looks for thresholds crossed, not rhythms disrupted. In healthy systems, stress rises and falls. Inflammation activates, then clears. Energy is spent, then restored. When that rhythm breaks, the body adapts by conserving. Repair becomes secondary. Vigilance stays partially engaged. Aging accelerates quietly, without dramatic warning signs. This quiet signal does not announce itself. It hides behind normal results and acceptable ranges. It blends into modern life, where everyone feels tired and recovery is expected to take longer. But it is one of the earliest indicators that longevity is slipping off course. And once researchers learned to see it, they began to find it everywhere. As researchers began tracking this signal over time, its predictive power became impossible to ignore. Patients who showed delayed recovery, even in minor stress tests, were far more likely to experience accelerated aging years later. The delays themselves were small, but they were consistent. The body's inability to return to baseline became the common thread. After exercise, heart rate stayed elevated longer. After illness, inflammation lingered. After emotional stress, sleep took days to normalize. Each system recovered, but not completely and not quickly. None of these delays were dramatic. Each one sat just inside what medicine considered normal. But together, they revealed a system struggling to finish what it started. The margin for error was shrinking. Even though no single test looked alarming, doctors often treated these delays as noise, variability, individual difference. But longitudinal data told a different story. These small lags compounded. Over time, they compressed resilience and narrowed the buffer that protects against illness and decline. What made the signal so easy to miss was its compatibility with modern life. Constant low-grade stress made delayed recovery seem expected. Everyone felt tired. Everyone took longer to bounce back. The abnormal had become common, and common was mistaken for harmless. Researchers began reframing the problem. Aging was not accelerating because the body was failing. It was accelerating because the body was never fully resolving. The system remained stuck between effort and recovery, never fully committing to either. This shifted the focus of longevity research, from preventing damage to restoring completion, from treating endpoints to observing cycles. The question was no longer only what was breaking, but what was never finishing. Once that lens changed, many age-related conditions began to look less mysterious. They were not sudden failures. They were the final consequence of years spent not quite recovering. Disease appeared when conservation could no longer compensate. And this raised an uncomfortable question. If this signal appears so early, why we wait so long to act on it? The conflict emerges when this quiet signal meets the limits of modern medicine. Healthcare is designed to respond to breakdown, not drift. It intervenes when thresholds are crossed, not when systems slowly lose their ability to resolve. Doctors are trained to look for pathology, clear causes, discrete failures. But delayed recovery does not fit neatly into a diagnosis. It is a pattern, not a problem. And patterns are easy to overlook in short appointments and isolated tests. Patients, meanwhile, adapt. They lower expectations. Fatigue becomes normal. Slow healing is accepted. Resilience quietly erodes without triggering alarm. By the time concern rises, the body has already been compensating for years. Researchers found that by the time disease appears, the signal has often been present for a long time. The body has been conserving, compensating, and narrowing its margin for error. Interventions arrive late, addressing damage rather than restoring capacity. Attempts to fix the issue often focus on intensity, stronger treatments, more aggressive protocols. But these can worsen the problem. Systems that struggle to recover are overwhelmed by additional demand. The underlying issue is not strength, but completion. The conflict is systemic. Longevity depends on early recognition of drift. But modern systems reward crisis response, not quiet course correction. Subtle delay does not trigger action until it becomes undeniable. Until medicine learns to value resolution as much as intervention, this signal will continue to pass unnoticed. And aging will continue accelerating long before anyone names it. The climax of this story is a realization that the most important signal of aging is not failure, but delay. When the body cannot return to baseline, it is already adapting to a narrower future. Repair gives way to conservation. Resilience thins. Aging accelerates quietly, long before collapse. The resolution is not more aggressive medicine. It is earlier attention. Noticing when recovery slows, when cycles no longer complete, when stress lingers longer than it should. Longevity improves when systems are supported before they fail, when lives are restructured to allow completion, when recovery is protected instead of postponed. Modern medicine will continue saving lives, but extending vitality requires a different lens, one that listens for quiet signals rather than waiting for loud ones. Because by the time aging announces itself clearly, the work of slowing it has already become much harder. Subscribe to join the journey.